ritualx, excuse me. Okay. ritualx was founded a number of years ago, and it was because of the opioid crisis. Our patients were coming to us, um, concerned about their narcotics, as they always are, looking for alternatives. And when this happened, we started to investigate. A little bit first about me. Um, live here in North Carolina. We're right in the middle of the Bible Belt. So we don't have THC marijuana, we have CBD. And so that's all I have to work with. And what we have are a group of pain clinics, Integrated Pain Solutions. And we have 7 pain clinics across the kind of the south east part of the state. And we serve about 4,000 patients a month. And it's from those interactions with patients that we learn a lot, not only about CBD, but other things as well. And so to be able to have that kind of population base that is desperate for change, that is looking for alternatives, they really are excited about participating in any studies that we have. In particular, CBD. We also have integrated laboratory solutions. Integrated laboratory solutions is part of our businesses, and what it does is it does hemp testing for the farmers here in North Carolina. When you're growing hemp and CBD, the legal limit of THC is 0.3. So farmers need to know when their crop is getting close to 0.3 so they know when to harvest it. So that's been very valuable to us, not only as a business, but because it gives us access to many different varieties of plant phenotypes that we can test. We understand their cannabinoid profiles, and then we can kind of select which ones we go and potentially purchase. So having a laboratory that is in the testing business for the farmers is that kind of beginning of that vertical integration of why ritualx is a little different than, much different than other organizations. The opioid crisis. Okay. So in 2018, when CBD was coming into the mainstream and the Farm Bill said, hey, it's completely legal across the state, we had to decide, do we want to get involved with this or not? And so we kind of looked at the literature. Now, of course, there wasn't much in the literature about CBD, but there sure was a lot about THC marijuana and all the other cannabinoids that are associated with that. And these are all some really good studies, and I would encourage you to look these up and read them. Because what they showed is, in the first 2 studies mentioned here, that folks that participated in medical marijuana programs having to deal with pain had between a 40 and 60% reduction in opioid use. That's pretty significant. And this third study really references more with mortality and looking at deaths. And in that study, a 25% reduction in death if you were on a medical marijuana program. These are pretty significant numbers. And in the middle of an opioid crisis, I mean, you've got to look at all alternatives. And so cannabis for sure is an alternative that should be embraced by more mainstream physicians. But there's a lot of we all know the social pressures. Imagine working for a hospital system and recommending this. So there's a lot of things that keep us from doing this, right? Kind of the medical industrial complex that kind of puts barriers up for us to try new things, but also kind of our own knowledge or lack of knowledge that sometimes put those barriers up. So I would encourage you to look at some of these studies and kind of open your mind to cannabinoids as a potential alternative to certain medical therapies. Now, we knew CBD was not medical marijuana, but our thought process was, even if we get half of these results, a 20% reduction in opioid consumption or a 10% reduction in a potential fatality, we thought that is significant enough for us to then kind of go through and examine how this worked. And so the first thing we did, and I wish I'd have picked a better slide that you could just sit here and me to tell you our story is that we studied 100 patients. So we took 100 patients over a 3-month period, and we gave them CBD. In the beginning, we didn't know what kind of CBD to give them, a broad spectrum, full spectrum, isolate. We didn't know how much to tell them to take, 2 milligrams, 50 milligrams, 100 milligrams, right? But we made some decisions on, we're going to use this potential product and this dose. So we had to throw it somewhere, and we took 100 patients. And of course, as pain physician, we're looking for reduction in pain. Right? That's what our patients are. We were very surprised at the results. When we got the results, what we found that there were 3 things that consistently we could reproduce. 1, sleep. Patients, we could get them to sleep better, initiating sleep as well as staying asleep. Um, and this seems significant, and folks really gravitated towards this. Patients in pain have problems sleeping. So when you were providing something that was non-pharmaceutical, that was helping with sleep, it fit in really nicely. However, we're not a sleep clinic, right? So it was an interesting thing to find out. We're not a sleep clinic. Glad you're sleeping. But the second thing we found out is that it reduced their anxiety. A good portion of the patients would come back and tell us that the sky seemed a little brighter, that things just had changed a little bit, that they were less anxious. One of the problems when you're taking opioids is that you're on this roller coaster all the time. Have good days, bad days, and when you're having a bad day, you're looking for relief. So you borrow a friend's benzodiazepine, and we know opioids plus benzodiazepines equals respiratory depression and death. So patients trying to manage, or they go for alcohol, same thing. They're trying to manage this roller coaster, and as they're trying to self-medicate this roller coaster, this is where we get into overdose and death. So if we could provide something for a patient that reduced their anxiety, this was starting to become very significant. And I remember that one of the patients saying that, every time I get that way, I go for my bottle of CBD. And so that was just that kind of reflex. Instead of going for the alcohol, they're going for that. Well, that's wonderful. So now it's starting to get interesting for us, because we start seeing that this can potentially add risk reduction to our patients' lifestyle. The third thing that I find the most interesting, and I spend quite a bit of time now researching and paying attention to, is the patients came back in, like I was kind of alluding to before, where the things are a little brighter, things are a little different. I'm seeing things from a different perspective. Long story short, this is neuroplasticity. An example we have is a patient who has PTSD. They lost part of their leg in the Iraq War, and at home he could only drive from his home to his place of work. Every time his wife asked him, "Would you go get a loaf of bread or pick up the child from daycare?" he would just go into a huge panic attack, and could only go from home and work. After being on CBD, I think it was about 4.5 months, he came back and said, "I can't believe it, but I understand. I'm not in Iraq anymore. I'm in America. There are no bombs on the side of the highway. I can drive. I can drive again. My life is back." This was our first exposure, that one particular patient, where kind of a light bulb went off of, wait a second, something's changing in the brain. And that was that word I mentioned, neuroplasticity or neurogenesis. So cannabinoids have this ability to help the brain reset and start getting back to healthy patterns of thinking. And we see a lot of opportunity with this, not only in pain management, where we're trying to get people to think themselves out of pain, but also people with PTSD, anxiety, depression, a lot of psychological. Once again, I'm not a psychiatrist. This isn't what I do, but I believe the research that we're doing and what we're learning will be very valuable to those that are having to deal with folks having mental health issues. So we did our study. Nobody's pain got any better and a little disappointed, but we had these things. They can sleep better, their anxiety's better, and they're thinking themselves into a better place in life. Well, when we went back and really talked to the patients, what we found is that they were functioning better, right? They were actually spending a little more time with their grandchild, or able to walk to the mailbox now, or thinking about getting a part-time job. And so it was a little confusing. We were saying, gosh, some of you seem to be functioning better, but you're telling me your pain's still a 10 out of 10. Well, what we found is we did a bad study. We weren't perfect people trying to that know how to set up perfect clinical studies, and we made a flaw. And the flaw was the way we kind of handled the information and the expectations of the patient, because the patients thought that we were trying to give them CBD to replace their opioids. So if they came back and said, hey, my pain went from a 9 to a 7, we were going to reduce their opioids. So because these folks are so dependent, not only physically, but psychologically dependent on it. If they have extra, they like to hoard them, right? Just so they have them in a rainy day. Maybe the pharmacies have been out. And we have a lot of problems in this area of pharmacies refusing to prescribe them or not having medications. So patients are conditioned to not want less. They want as many as they can so they can manage themselves. When we realized that, and were able to talk to our patients, we found that their pain was reduced. Now, not as significantly as we wanted, and but it was. It would come from a 9 to a 7 or an 8 to a 6. They would they would give us positive affirmation their pain was better. Now, was it enough to lower their pain medication? Well, not initially. We have some tricks on how to do that. If you take CBD at the same time that you take uh, your opioid, two things happen. One, it makes the patient's perception of the opioid that it's stronger. So if you're taking 5 milligrams of hydrocodone, it feels like 10 milligrams of hydrocodone. So if you can play this kind of mental exercise with the patient where, hey, take it at the same time, and I bet you it's going to feel stronger. And then you kind of set them up for that. They go off for a month, they come back and they go, yeah, doc, that was great. It does make the opioids feel stronger. And then go, great, let's reduce the opioids a little bit. Remember, you were okay before, you were doing okay. Let's reduce it a little bit, since now we know adding this makes it twice as strong. Now, doesn't work all the time. People are very resistant, but it does open the conversation for us and gives us a softer place to be in order to try to convince folks to wean off the narcotics, because they're awful. Even though we prescribe probably more narcotics in the state of North Carolina than any other pain facility, they're poison, and we know they're poison. They're a necessary poison, and they're a poison that our country and our society has gotten used to and expects, because we love immediate gratification, and no one wants to be in pain. But it is our Integrated Pain Solutions job to eventually have every patient come off of opioids, find alternatives, and we are trying to move in that direction very quickly. The second thing that happens when you take it with the opioid is it helps prevent tolerance. One of the problems with continuing to prescribe opioids is this kind of escalating dose. I need more, I need more. It just doesn't keep continuing to work. And so we've noticed that, and there's a good study out there showing cannabinoids kind of blunting that kind of needing more and more opioids. So once again, protective, and it keeps us from having to talk to the patient coming back saying, I need more, doc, give me more, doc. So at least it stops going in that direction, because we know more, it leads to bad things. So very interesting study, the first one, but it was enough to get us excited. That says, we're going to do this, and we have, and we probably have about 1,000 of our 4,000 patients that currently take it. Once again, we're in the Bible Belt, so there's a lot of social things that keep folks from embracing this. But we never give up on our patients, and we don't expect everybody to convert over and do something. It takes time. So if it takes a year, 2 years, 3 years for them eventually to say, okay, I'll try that, that's okay. We'll be here for them, and we're looking forward to helping them. So that was kind of our beginning of our story of why we got involved. What I'd like to transition to a little bit now is just to talk a little bit about the endocannabinoid system. And then we'll talk about ritualx and what we're doing that probably is much different than anything else that is out there right now. So the endocannabinoid system was discovered in the 1990s. So it's relatively new. We didn't know about this, right? We've known about cannabis for hundreds of thousands of years, that it impairs people's perception and creates a euphoria. But we didn't understand what was going on in the body. And in the 1990s, Israeli scientists discovered this. And this is where kind of the very interesting thing started to come about, that there wasn't just a receptor in the brain that was stimulated that caused this. These receptors were everywhere throughout the whole body. And so this signaling system that we have really just is all throughout our body. And one of the ways I like to think about this signaling system is kind of that nature, or God, however you think about things, gave us an internal doctor, right? An internal physician that's able to kind of create balance and homeostasis. And we know this to be true. You take part of the liver out, it grows back. We know our body's capable of changing and, in healing itself. And it's the endocannabinoid system that's sending those signals to say, hey, turn this enzymatic process on, turn this one off, and try to modulate things to keep things in balance. Now, we say the word CBD, and that's very common, but it's really a misnomer. CBD is one molecule, and the cannabis plant has over 100 cannabinoids, right? CBA, CBT. I mean, I could go through the alphabet soup, and you can see them here on the screen of all the different cannabinoids that have been discovered. So when a hemp plant or a cannabis plant is grown, yes, the number one, if you look at concentration, will usually be either THC or CBD. Those are the highest concentrations. But then these are other minor cannabinoids are very significant as far as not only their total content of cannabinoid, but we're finding the composition of the minor cannabinoids really influence the experience that the end user has, whether that is in the medical marijuana world or in the cannabinoid world. So even though we say CBD, I want to impress upon you that the plant-based cannabinoids are very diverse. And I think that's very interesting from a scientist standpoint, to be able to have access to so many different things that we can study, that we can understand, because the tendency is to take one of these, right, CBG or CBDA, and say, let's purify it and give it to somebody and see what it does. And that's kind of the mindset of scientists and science, and even me as a physician. Hey, I want to isolate one thing. I want to see what it does, because this one thing does this. Reality is that may be true, right? We may be able to find a certain cannabinoid does something. And we actually have a single molecule scientist on our team who's taking a single molecule of a phytocannabinoid, and we are changing it, right, through laboratory to create an artificial, a man-made cannabinoid that will hopefully have a certain property we're looking for. So pharmaceutical industry is very good at modulating molecules to create something that does a particular thing. So one of the things we have to get out of when we're thinking about cannabinoids is that this thing does something. That this particular product will do this, or this particular combination of cannabinoids will do that. What we find is it's very complicated. So there's so many different cannabinoids, and there's such a different way of our endocannabinoid system existing, because we're all genetically different, that this becomes very complex. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I just want to differentiate. When we say CBD, really we're talking about a lot of different cannabinoids. Now, you can buy a CBD product that's an isolate, and we have one of those as one of our formulas, where it is just CBD. And folks that like those types of products are typically folks, our police officers and firefighters, people who get drug tested, who want to just make sure, absolutely, there is no THC. Um, but most of our products are full spectrum because that's very important. And we like to push the THC content to 0.3 as close as we can because THC is important. And we'll just talk briefly about the THC, why it's important. I'd like to think about THC as kind of the key that opens the door that allows these other cannabinoids to really maximally affect their effort. I think if I had 1 to 2% THC in my state, I think some of the products we have and some of the research we're doing, I think would be more robust. But I have 0.3, this is what I have to deal with, and we're still having great results. The endocannabinoid system has 3 components. It has endocannabinoids, right? So we were talking about these phytocannabinoids earlier, but we also have endocannabinoids. So our body makes its own cannabinoids. And so anandamide and 2-AG are the 2 cannabinoids that we make. If you've ever heard of the thing called the runner's high, that's actually anandamide being released from the brain. So that kind of euphoric feeling after running, those are endocannabinoids. So we already have our own endocannabinoids. So what we're doing here with CBD is taking plant-based cannabinoids and taking them to modulate our own endocannabinoid system. We also have receptors. Right now, some minor receptors have been identified, but CB1 and CB2 receptors are the primary receptors that have been identified, studied, and kind of located through the body. CB1 receptors are found primarily in the central nervous system in the brain. CB2 receptors found mainly in the periphery. There's a lot of crossover. There's CB1 in the periphery and there's CB2 in the brain, but predominantly CB1 in the brain, CB2 in the periphery. And in the periphery, there's a concentration of these in the liver, a lot in the gut, the female organs, but they're everywhere. Even the skin, your surface of your skin has endocannabinoid receptors, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. And then we have enzymes, Fa and Magal, and there's a couple others, but those are the main ones. And really what happens here in the endocannabinoid system is you have an endocannabinoid, it gets released from a nerve terminal, goes to a receptor, stimulates it, and the enzyme breaks it down. And so it's a combination of those 3 things, and how fast the enzyme breaks it down is how the endocannabinoid system is working. So very simple way of thinking about this. We have receptors, enzymes, and endocannabinoids. I think I've already talked on this, the anandamide and 2-AG. So it looks like I kind of already spoke about that. And once again, I think I got ahead of myself. Maybe I should have been hitting my little button here. And here's an example of that receptor and releasing and where the enzymes are located. And very simple system. However, very complex because it's everywhere and we don't quite understand it, right? And that's what research is trying to understand now. Why? How? And we don't have a lot of those answers. So when I have to talk about the science, we could get awfully geeky, but geeky doesn't make sense when we really care about clinical. And I'm sure you guys are here today to understand more clinical of how to think about this, how to prepare your patient when they take this. So we're not going to spend much time on the geeky stuff, but just understand these main principles of endocannabinoids, receptors, enzyme breaking them down at the nerve terminal. Well, how did it work? I think I kind of led into that. We kind of understand some of the basics here, but to be honest, we don't understand how it works completely. And so that's a little elusive. So as a physician who is recommending something and you don't really know the mechanism of action, it can be a little off-putting. But when you understand the big picture, it's okay that we don't understand exactly. As long as the patient is having a positive outcome, it's okay if I don't understand, as long as I'm not worried about it being toxic in any way. And we haven't seen that. So as we've continued to give this to our patients, we really don't see any toxicity. Now, CBD is metabolized by the cytokine P450 system in the liver, and I think 60% of all medications are metabolized by that pathway. So we always tell our patients, if you start to take a CBD product, then please tell your primary care or any prescribing physician that you're taking it, because their medications, one, they need to know, and they need to adjust. We see a lot of patients with hypertension, diabetes, whose hypertension starts getting better. And when it does, they need to really reduce those blood pressure medications and reduce the amount of insulin they're taking. And so having the primary care physician involved in that, knowing their patients taking it, knowing how it's being metabolized, will help not only the patient, but the physician as well understand what's going on with the patient. But we've never seen any problems with that as far as toxicity of other medications, or patients getting too hypotensive or their blood sugar having problems. If we had one complaint that it seems to be there, and it's not significant, it's younger women taking this up into the age like 35 and less, will say it makes them feel nauseated. It just doesn't agree with them, and they don't like the taste. Something about it in the GI, it doesn't work sometimes, but that's very rare. That's probably 2 to 3%. So if you do see something like that, typically what we do is we try to change formulations. A lot of times I think it's kind of the texture of it. There's just something about it. It may be the carrier oil. But when somebody has a problem like that, we typically say, we don't have smokable in this state, but are there other ways of vaping or things to get it in your body without you having to consume a tincture? We believe a tincture is the best way to consume because it gets absorbed in the mucous membranes and it avoids first pass hepatic metabolism, the cytokine P450 system. So it's able to get into your body before it's starting to be metabolized. So that's one of the reasons, if you look at our product line, that's all we have is tincture, because we believe it's the probably the best way of getting this into your system, as well as I like to keep it simple. My patients are probably on average 9th grade education. And so for me to keep things simple, one product line, one way of thinking about things has made all the difference. If we'd have developed vape, gummies, this, that, it would have been very confusing, I think, for the patient, and it's not very scientific. And so for us, kind of really leading with science and education is number one. Number two, that's for sure. I've alluded to this before, that needing to think about the endocannabinoid system is kind of homeostasis, that it's your body trying to stay, in balance. And in America, we are hyperinflamed. Our diet really sends us into an inflammatory state. And that's why we see so many illnesses of autoimmune disorder, early dementia, even the diabetes, hypertension. I mean, our country is not getting healthier, and it's not getting healthier primarily because of our diet. So, because of our diet, because we are all so out of whack, something like CBD really needs to almost be put in the water supply. As I often say, funny, that we should take fluoride out, which is very caustic. We should put cannabinoids in the water supply, because that was one of the reasons we named our company ritualx. Well, there was two reasons we named it ritualx, to be honest. One, we think it needs to be a daily ritual, right, for your health, like taking a vitamin. You really need to take CBD, whether you think it's working or not. Take it every day, and let's see, can we prevent these illnesses, right? This is going to take us years to figure that out. But I need people to start taking it every day so we can understand and study, does this prevent diabetes? Does this prevent hypertension? Does this prevent these things before they ever start? And that would be very exciting. But those are very longitudinal studies. Right now, it's a theory. I'm very supportive of the theory. My family, everyone that I can try to influence takes it every day. The X part of Ritual X is the unknown. I can't tell you what formula to take, and I can't tell you how it's working. It's the unknown. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later of how we are overcoming that unknown. So our mission at Ritual X is to really personalize cannabinoid medicine. Very interesting statistic. And this was pre-COVID, that 20 million Americans had taken CBD. But I think it was only, 6.4 million Americans are using it on a regular basis. One way to loosely interpret that is that, I'm sorry, that wasn't the right number, and I got too many numbers in my head. The number we would use is something like 4 point something, because it's only about a 7 to 8% likelihood that you're going to continue to use this on a regular basis. So when we took those, and that made sense to us. If you go out and you buy a bottle of CBD and you're going to take it for whatever you're going to take it for, it's about a 7% chance that it's going to work for your intention. And there's multiple reasons for that. Remember, all the diversity of all the different phytocannabinoids, all the diversity of the individual, how much should I take? So all these variables lead to very poor outcomes. So right now in America, CBD is more of a fad than it is the practice of medicine. So our mission is to say, we understand the complexity, or at least we want to understand it, and we are moving forward to understand it better and better. And we are trying to move towards personal cannabinoid medicine. So I think we talked a little bit about this. Who is Ritual X? But it was formed in 2018. And we've grown since then. I can't believe the things we believed and understood then compared to what we believe and understand now. And so it's been very fun to kind of watch that transition. And that's always my struggle, is to continually stay open-minded and not get locked into, oh, I think I understand something now. I really always try to question myself that maybe I don't quite understand things, but we've sure learned a lot, that's for sure. Anything else about this? When we started, we had a symposium. We brought police, sheriff, the lawyers, the North Carolina Medical Board, who my partner actually happens to be on, doctors, mid-levels. We brought everybody and had a symposium, and it was packed. It was great. It was a wonderful event. And it was, the first in the state. And my thought was, hey, if you're going to arrest me now for doing this, arrest me. But we're getting ready to move forward. And we wanted to bring everybody to the table. It was very well received. And it was nice that the chief of police in our county actually spoke. He had had such positive results about it, that he actually spoke at that. So that was quite an interesting event. But we really always want to lead with education. That's why I'm here talking to you now, is that if I can't get you educated first, you're back into it's a fad type of thing. So education, of practitioners, patients, is really paramount, because without it, it just doesn't work. But education's hard. People taking time to get educated. Everybody wants a quick fix. Just give me the bottle, I'll figure it out. Okay, good luck. It's very difficult. One of the main reasons that Ritual X got started is, as a physician, we're kind of control freaks. And back then, there was a good study that showed that 70% of all the products that are out there are not what you think they are. They have too much THC, or not even any CBD, or the way they were extracted was inferior. And so for me as a physician to recommend a product to my patient, and it's a 70% likelihood they're going to find a good product, that didn't make any sense. So we were kind of stuck. What do? We like what we see here, but once again, what product do we recommend? And since we had a laboratory already that was doing urine drug testing and happened to have LCMS machines that were doing that type of testing, we could convert one of them over to do hemp testing. And that was one of the first things we did. We bought a couple of different bottles of CBD and we did our own testing. Is this a good product? So we can recommend it. But one thing led to another. Being really protective of my patients is that I wanted to make sure that the products we were offering our patients, we knew how they were grown, we knew how they were processed, and we knew the end product had exactly what we thought it had. So that was very important for ritualx, for my patients as well, is that kind of control. So why even think about choosing us? Because now the market has matured. There are a lot of good products out there. There are people who are growing some really good cannabinoids. There are people that have great extraction processes, and there are products out there that are really good. So why choose our really good product over another really good product? And I think it's probably our story, right? And how we came about this, and really what's driving us. It's the science, it's the leading with education. It's really kind of bringing the practice of medicine into kind of a consumer product that hopefully gives folks confidence that the product is what it is, but the recommendations are what they are. And as you know, or may not know, we can't make a lot of recommendations. We can't make a lot of health claims, can't make a lot of recommendations as far as this is going to do this for this. And so that's a real barrier because the public expects those kind of things. And it sees it all the time and all the sham advertising going on, with other products out there, that it expects it from its cannabinoid products. That's why you don't see our products named a formula sleep or a formula pain, because I don't have a formula sleep or a formula pain yet. Now we're working on those. But what I have are different combinations of cannabinoids that are consistent. And we'll talk more about that later. But having all these 20 different formulations to be able to choose from is much different than anything else that we've seen in the marketplace. So that variety is what's needed in order to get the result that we're looking for. I think we've always had a nurse hotline where, we just encourage our customers to please contact us at any time. Now, we've actually put the nurse hotline on pause right now, and that was for a legal reason that came up in another state. But our attorney is working through that now to kind of work so we can do that. We have a customer service line. It's the same thing as our hotline, but we used to call it a nurse hotline. And when we started implying that they were getting a medical professional to actually talk to them, this is where in the retail world, in the way CBD is categorized by not only the FDA, but the government, our attorneys was a little concerned. So it's not called a nurse hotline right now. It's our customer service hotline, and we probably need to make sure we're doing a good job to let folks know the customer service line will answer your questions. We will get to the bottom of things for you. And a nurse or physician, myself, if appropriate, will get the answers that folks need. But we think that's very important to make sure we're available to answer questions because people have questions, they need answers. Here's a listing of our different 20 formulas. And our formula 1 is our full spectrum formula. It's probably consistent with whatever other CBD products are out there. Formula 2 is a full spectrum. I think it's, is that correct? Oh yeah, it's CO2 extracted. The first formula 1 is ethanol extracted. The second formula is a CO2 extracted. So there's different extractions, right? Ethanol extraction and CO2 extraction. CO2 extraction is more expensive. It's perceived as being pure, and it is. Unfortunately, it doesn't pull as many of the cannabinoids off. And it's just too good almost. Ethanol extraction is actually superior in really pulling those minor cannabinoids off. So we do have a couple of CO2 extracted products, Formula 2 and Formula 3. And the Formula 3 is the one we mentioned before that is primarily an isolate that has no THC. So and it's also good for pets. And it's funny because every time a storm comes by, we give our little dog our CBD just to keep him a little more calm. And so it's funny stuff. As you look at the rest of the formulations, the base product is Formula 1. So in the Formula 4 through 20, we have kind of Formula 1 is the base. And then we've added different terpenes in our terpene collection. Over here in strains, our thought process there was, hey, there was some interesting data. Now, a lot of it was anecdotal about, hey, what type of strains of kind of medical cannabis do what for what? And so we took 4 of those strains, White Widow, ACDC, Girl Scout Cookie, and Cherry Pie, and we took the cannabinoids that were commonly found in those and created different strains because we wanted to see, okay, we had the single molecule here of terpene. We wanted to see what happens when we put 4 or 5 different cannabinoids together in these strains that people have historically say, this is good for pain, or this is good for anxiety, or this is good for depression. Our last 2 categories deal with 2 other minor cannabinoids, one minor and actually a whole different category, is CBG. CBG is kind of I like to say stem cell. It's the main cannabinoid, and off CBG are where all THC, CBD, all the minor cannabinoids start to break off and to be formed. So it's kind of the mother of all cannabinoids. And so we came up with 3 formulations looking at 5%, 50%, and pure, I say pure, 95% CBG. Our CBA collection deals with the plant. So when you grow cannabis, it comes in the form of acid. So if you did a test on the cannabis plant, you'd see THCA, CBDA, right? It's the acid form. It's not until you heat the acid form that you create THC. So if you ate cannabis, you would not become impaired. You have to heat it in order to decarboxylate it. So you go from THCA to THC. So the concept here is to take hemp or cannabis and cold press it. Don't extract it because extraction usually has to deal with heat. Just cold press it, squeeze that oil out. So you get what's in the plant, in nature. And typically nature makes it perfect, right? We as man then go and change it, right? We're so smart, we'll heat it and turn it into THC or CBD. But nature, the way nature makes it, is in the acid form. So for us, having CBDA, and it's not just CBDA, it's all the minor cannabinoids too. They're all in the acid form. You're getting it the way the plant made it. And I'll have to be honest, is that our formula 18, 19, I think are some of our best formulas. And as a matter of fact, I take formula 19 on a daily basis because one, I get the best of both worlds. I get the CBDA and I get my CBD and all those minor cannabinoids. But pay attention to that. That's an area that I'm really excited about. And we have a study going on now with CBDA that really, really, really excited about. Our balm. Now, our balm, we needed a topical product, and in pain management, everybody wants a topical product. And one of the problems is that you can make some really good topical products with ketamine and clonidine and lidocaine. And I mean, we can compound some really great products. Unfortunately, I can't remember how many years ago, if it was 6 or so, insurance doesn't pay for it anymore. So we could compound things topically and they would work wonderfully, but insurance doesn't pay for it. once again, my patients are kind of the poor, the elderly. They can't afford those things. But topical is always superior to taking something internally. So if I can help people with pain topically, you want to do that. Now with our balm, we we did some experiments on how much oil, because the concentrated oil comes a certain viscous, and we tried to push it as hard as much as we could as far as getting as much CBD into the balm as we can. Anymore, it doesn't break down. It just doesn't, I can't get it to gel together. But we really have a very potent balm. And I like the balm, to be honest with you. It's really kind of my go-to type of thing when I introduce somebody to cannabinoids or CBD, because they don't have to take it internally. So if they have any resistance to taking a cannabinoid product, just put a balm on. It's interesting. I'll share this with you. What's the mechanism of action of CBD on the skin? And if you're putting it on an elbow, how's it penetrating, 2 inches to get down to the affected area, especially given its kind of nature? These oils do not penetrate the skin, right? So we're looking at some things, adding DMSO and things to see, can we pull them into the body? But we have a theory, because these things, this works. And we know that endocannabinoid system is all over the dermis. So by putting the phytocannabinoids on the dermis and just stimulating the endocannabinoid system, it starts sending those signals. So the CBD doesn't actually have to penetrate, even though I think they could make it superior. If you just stimulate the cells, it'll start sending signals to the cells below it in order to make those changes. So our patients love the balm, that's for sure. And it's a great way to introduce this to a patient that's resistant, even maybe the first time patient before they ever even try the oral. Give them a sample of a balm, give them a balm, let them see that this works. Once they prove to themselves, wow, that worked on my arm, if they're taking a tincture later for something else, pain or hypertension, diabetes, psychologically, and if we get the placebo effect, it may work for that. And as somebody who's understanding the placebo effect a little differently lately, I love the placebo effect, right? Placebo effect's wonderful because I don't have to really give a medication. It's the person's brain that's so powerful, kind of helping the body move through something. So placebo effect is real, and as a physician, I really enjoy it. What we've done is we collect information and data. So one of the things we have is a recommendation process where we ask 14 questions about the epigenetics of our patients. And when we get that information, we match them up with 4 different formulas. They try those formulas. When they find one that likes them, they like, then we match that formula up with the information they gave us to say, a patient similarly to this may benefit from formula 12, for example, for their pain. So the data we're collecting as we're doing those ongoing studies and getting that data in, we've taken and put into these discovery packs. So in these discovery packs, what we've done is said, for pain, when we look at our pain patients and patients who have been taking our product, here are the four that are the top of the list. And so even though there may be 4 different formulas in each pack right now, those could change. So right now, if you bought a pain pack and it had 2, 7, 9, and 12, a year from now, it actually might be 2, 7, 9, and 15. As we get more data on what are the top 4 that are dealing with pain, those packs will change. And so what we've put in these packs for pain, anxiety, sleep, energy, and focus are those cannabinoids or cannabinoid combinations that have kind of risen to the surface. Once again, to kind of reiterate, there's a lot of trial and error that has to go on. So when a patient gets a pack like this, we're not saying all 4 of these formulas are going to work for you. What we're saying, and our strategy is, here are 4 that may work for you. Now, here's a journal. We'd like you to take the first formula for a period of time, a week, and document, how did it work for you? Then do the second one. Hey, how did that work better? Did it work worse? Or maybe it worked for something else you weren't even thinking about. You have to really go through a process to find which one works for you. So this is a very good way, and this is, you have to explain that to the patient. I hope we do a good job explaining it with our materials that come along with this, but really it's trial and error. So even, as I mentioned before, about a 7% likelihood that the bottle you take is going to be that you buy is going to work for you. What we give here in these discovery packs, even worst case scenario, we haven't even picked the right formulas, we're at least giving you close to a 30% chance of it working. We think it works better than 30% because of the products we've just put into these packages. But that's what's kind of behind the discovery packs as far as the rationale of why we offer discovery packs, because we want to meet the consumer where they are. And a lot of times I just want to buy something. I don't want to answer a bunch of questions. I don't want to have to think too hard. Just give me something. I'll go off and try things. If that one particular discovery pack didn't work for one thing, trying another discovery pack for the same thing with 4 different formulas would be just as effective. In theory, a person could go through each one of our formulas, trying each one until they find one that works for them. I imagine at the end of the day, if we were to revisit and have another talk a couple of years from now, we're going to have 100 formulas. But starting off, we have 20. This is what we're working with, and we're trying to understand what do those 20s do, and what do those 20 formulas not do. Right? I'm as interested in what they don't do than what they do as well. Here's some of our best sellers. These sample packs, and these are things that you can look at. I'm sure there'll be some materials that'll come along the way, but these are ones that have kind of risen to the surface when we go to our retail and we go to folks that continue to order from us. Oh, golly, we did a lot of talking today, and I want to take a moment to answer any questions anyone may have. I know we've covered a lot of information. This is very complex stuff, but really at the end of the day, it's pretty darn simple. Trial and error and education. So thank you so much for taking the time and listening, and I'd love to hear any questions anyone has.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Taylor. We truly appreciate it. We know how important all of this information is, and I think that it's going to be a great opportunity for our patients and their doctors and their patient base.
Yeah.
So I have a question here from Josh. He says it's a bit hard to tell from your website, but what are your bottles made from?
What are our what made from?
Bottles.
Bottles, glass.
Okay.
Yeah, they do look white, so they look ceramic or something like that, don't they?
Right.
But no, glass is the best way to contain that. We put the white on the outside because light does destroy, kind of break things down, and so kind of protect it from light.
Perfect. Do you have any other questions? He says thank you. Are there any other questions from anybody else out there? If they do have any questions after the fact, Dr. Taylor, is it possible to email Heather and have her get them in touch with you?
Absolutely. Hey, I got a question. Will you come up positive on a drug test? The answer is yes and no. Let me explain that. Yes. So there's 2 different types of drug tests. There's kind of screening drug test, which is an immunoassay based test. So you have a little antibody there, and a CBD molecule or a THC comes by and causes it to change color, right? You urinate in a cup, it changes color. So it's not very sensitive, too sensitive, but not very specific. And so if you're on a CBD product and you pee in a cup and it's a color change, good chance you're going to come up positive, right? Because it's a false positive. The other test is LCMS. This is where we look at the molecular weight of the molecule. And the molecular weight of THC is different than the molecular weight of CBD. So on an LCMS, our confirmation test, very unlikely 99.99% likely, if you're taking a cannabinoid product, you will not come up positive on an LCMS confirmation test. So that's very important. Folks that are concerned about drug testing, for them to be educated so they can educate their employer, they can educate whoever's testing them. Hey, if you use the screening test, I may come up positive, I'm on cannabinoids. Please send that off for confirmation before I lose my
Right.
job or you make a
Right.
decision about me. So that's
Very
a
good
really
point.
important question I get asked a lot. And I just want to make sure that you guys had a little understanding about that.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Wonderful, guys. If you have any other questions, we'll have you send them to us and we can get them over to Heather and then over to the doctors. So I truly appreciate your time today. This has been one of our best webinars, and we cannot thank you enough for your time and your input.
Well, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to working with you over the next couple quarters.
Pleasure.